The Tudor period was a time of execution, with thousands of people going to their deaths at the axe or gallows. But one of the most important executions saw a Queen of England that changed history forever go to the scaffold inside of the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn was the second wife of Henry VIII, and her marriage to the king split the country in two, as she forced the king to split from Rome and the Pope, as she refused to sleep with Henry until she had been made his queen. Henry then did this, and within a few years he had grown tired of Anne Boleyn, and because of this he ordered Thomas Cromwell, his chief adviser, to get him away out of the marriage. Cromwell came up with some salacious claims, and Anne was accused of incest, adultery and treason, but today Anne is considered a victim of her husband, the King of England, and his best friend. But who was the man who was tasked with executing Anne Boleyn? Join us today as we look at the unknown executioner of Anne Boleyn, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Inside of the Tower of London, the executioner who was scheduled to take Anne Boleyn's life had never worked in England before. He was a swordsman, and this was rare for English executions, as it was much more common for someone to be beheaded using the axe, or to be executed at the gallows being hanged. Tower Hill was a public beheading site, which saw hundreds of heads roll, and be taken then to be placed above London Bridge, after the axeman had performed his job. Sometimes there was a problem with these executions, as the axe was considered not the most reliable, as things could go wrong, and a head may not be taken in one swing. In the following years, Jack Ketch, London's axeman and executioner, would make some terrible messes of his job. For example, the executions of Lord Russell and the Duke of Monmouth, James Scott, were so poorly performed with many swings of the axe needed that the crowd almost dragged him onto the block next, and a riot almost broke out. Ketch even had to apologise for his actions, but the axe was a heavy weapon. However, the man who executed Anne Boleyn was a swordsman, and he used his own weapon and blade. When he unveiled it at the Tower of London, the crowd gasped, but the sword could be swung with a greater speed, and if accurate it was believed to be more reliable than using axe. But because of this it required a skilled man to use it, and also there was no need for a block to be used unlike with the axe. Because of this, Anne Boleyn was executed while she was kneeling on the scaffold. But it was a man referred to as the Sword of Calais who performed the execution, and he had been fetched from France to do this job especially. He had a great reputation and was considered very skilled. Henry VIII did not want his wife to die by the commoner's axe, and it was said of the swordsman that he was an expert in the use of heavy continental executioner's swords, which could cut the head off a prisoner who was kneeling upright in place of the clumsier English axe, which needed the prisoner's chin to rest on the block. Anne would say before she met the executioner that she heard he was a good executioner, as a lieutenant of the Tower wrote to Cromwell saying, "Anne said I heard say the executioner was very good, and I have a little neck." So his flawless reputation had travelled to England, and also to the very woman whose life he would be taking. Executioners were not necessarily celebrities, so when the King of England asked him to come and execute his wife, it's possible that the Sword of Calais was honoured or nervous by this. He would have been shocked, and inside his French town, he would have spent his time executing criminals and murderers, and certainly not queens or members of the royal family. Some executioners tried to stay anonymous, especially those who executed royalty. For example, the executioner who killed Charles I, the English king, is still not completely known. He was fearful of a backlash for executing a king who many believed was sent by God to rule. The Sword of Calais was probably not concerned about backlash following Anne's execution, as he was French and would not face any punishment. But he was paid very handsomely and was given a sum of £23, 6 shillings and 8 pence for executing Anne Boleyn, and he was given royal lodgings whilst he was in England. He was summoned from Calais and would then have travelled by boat to England. In his luggage he would have carried his trusty executioner's sword, which was well known to him. He then landed in the south of England, or may have even landed in London, travelling by the Thames, before he travelled under royal escort to the Tower of London. He may have also stayed in the lodgings close to the victim Anne Boleyn, so that he could be fetched at any point to execute her. Whilst this was happening, it's likely that the scaffold was being created near to the White Tower. Before Anne was led out to her execution, The executioner would have got dressed in his clothing, and he may have even had his face covered by a hood, obscuring himself. However, with a sword he needed to be accurate as possible, so he may not have had a mask. As Anne came to the scaffold, he would have watched the proceedings, and saw her attended on by her ladies, as well as the Tower's officials. The executioner would then have also seen a small collection of dignitaries, including Cromwell, who was there to witness the execution. Whilst on the scaffold, Anne Boleyn said goodbye to her ladies. Then the Sword of Calais fell to his knees in front of her, and begged for her forgiveness for what he was about to do. Anne may have then handed him some valuables, and it's believed she gave him a purse of coins, which was almost a bribe to make sure that the execution went seamlessly, without any problems arising. Often the condemned gave almost a tip to make sure that the head was taken off in one swing. As the ladies cleared the scaffold, Anne then fell to her knees in front of the 200-strong crowd. She said her final prayers, and the Sword of Calais then signalled to his executioner's assistant to make a sound, and with this, Anne, with her blindfold on, turned towards the assistant. Whilst this was happening, the executioner, who had removed his shoes so that they did not make any noise, appeared with his huge sword, and the crowd gasped. Quickly he spun the sword towards her neck, and in one swift blow, the momentum from the blade sliced through, and her head was taken cleanly off in one blow. Anne Boleyn did not see the blade coming. Normally after executions, especially of those who were declared traitors, the executioner would hold up the head to the crowd, but the Sword of Calais did not do this. He made a hasty getaway, whilst Anne's ladies were gathering her remains inside a wooden chest. They would then take this away to the chapel nearby for its burial. However, he did take a gown that belonged to Anne, and he left the scaffold to begin his journey back to France, as his work was done. But then later the English sought to buy the gown of Anne Boleyn, which would have been blood-soaked, off the Sword of Calais. They paid 100 crowns for it, and the Privy Council arranged to get this back, to make sure that no relics of Anne Boleyn survived. But the Sword of Calais was the unknown executioner who took the life of the most controversial queen England has ever had. The sword that took Anne's head would have been sent back to France with the executioner, but little is known about the man that executed the queen. He may have wanted anonymity, but by being foreign, he ensured that his actions would not catch up with him, as chances are he returned to his normal life in Calais when he got home. But whoever the executioner of Anne Boleyn was, he performed the bloody office in one swift, successful blow. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.